So today, guys, we're going to be working on volume. Go ahead and turn to the geometry section of your notebook and title this page Volume. Now, what I want you to do is go ahead and copy this down. Copy this shape down. Try to draw it where we have your dimension, which is 3 yards, 4 yards, and 5 yards. Go ahead and pause the video. Now, you should have learned in 5th grade the formula for volume. Now, just to refresh, the volume is length times width times height for representing L, W, and H. Now, it could also be the base times the height. Now, you drew this in your notebook. Let's go ahead and identify our dimensions. Right here, let me just, oops. Right here is our length. Right here is your width. And up top here is your height. Now, go ahead and solve this. Pause the video. Now, you should have solved this plugging in the length, the width, and the height. Now, the volume of this, what we call a rectangular prism, is 3 times 4 times 5, which gives us a total of 60 yards cubed. Now, look at here. The difference between area and volume is that we know area is raised to the 2nd power, it's squared. But with volume is raised to the 3rd power because it's cubed. Now, because it's cubed, you can think about it this way. Volume is a 3-dimension shape. It's not 2D, it's not flat like area. So to think about it, it's always cubed, raised to the 3rd power. Now, if we had volume a different way, if we had it where it's the base times the height. Now, we know the base of anything is going to be length times width. So, like I said, this would be the length, this would be the width. So, the base of this would give us 3 times 4. So, this equals the base. So, our base equals 12. Go ahead and write that down. Now, with our base being 12, our height we know equals 5. So once again, you do 12 times 5, which gives us a total of 60 yards cubed, just like we had here. Cubed, just like that. Now in 6th grade, you learned this in 5th grade. You should have. Now, the difference between 5th grade and 6th grade is that instead of finding the volume of whole numbers, we're going to find volume of fractional lengths. It's the same concept where we have our length right here, and then we have our width right here, and then we have height. Now, the only difference is that we're using fractions. Now go ahead and pause the video and copy this down. Now our setup, we should copy down that we have 3/4 our length, 3/8 our width times h our height, which is 3/4. Now you know when we're multiplying fractions, we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator. So you have 3 times 3 times 3, and then 4 times 8 times 4. Now 3 times 3 times 3 we know is going to be 27. Let me make that smaller. We know it's going to be 27. 4 times 8 times 4. Well, we know 4 times 8 is going to give us 32. And 32 times 4 is going to give us 128. So go ahead and copy this down. We have 27 over 128. Clone that. Go ahead and copy that down. Now remember, look at our units here. We have feet. So it's not just going to be 27 over 128. It's going to be feet, and remember what I said, feet cubed. Feet cubed. So remember to watch out for your units, okay? So it's going to be 27 over 128 feet cubed. Now doing exactly what we just did, go ahead and find the volume of this rectangular prism using what we know about the volume, which is length times width times height, and then using the fractional dimensions where we have our length right here. Just because it's a different position doesn't mean it's not length. Our length, our width, and our height. Go ahead and label that and go ahead and write the formula of volume before you multiply the dimensions, okay? So pause the video and we'll get back to it. Now our answer for this, you should have written the volume, which is length times width times height, and then using the fraction dimensions, you have 3 halves times 5 halves times 5 halves, which we had 75 over 8. You can also write this as a mixed number. It's whatever you want. So 8 can go into 75 9 times. So it can go in 9 times because 8 times 9 is 72. And we have 3 left over. So you're going to have 9 and 3/8 inches cubed. This tells us inches. So inches cubed. Go ahead and write that down. Now let's read this problem together. A right rectangular prism has edges of 1 1/4, 1 and 1 1/2. How many cubes with side lengths of 1/4 would be needed to fill the prism? What is the volume of the prism? Now, first and foremost, we want to identify what we know. We know that 1 1/4 is going to be our length. We know 1 is going to be our width. And we know 1 1/2 is going to be our height. Now, don't worry about this 1/4 part yet. Let's worry about making the volume of this. So, look at this measurement here. We want to make both of these into improper fractions. So it'll be easier to multiply when we're trying to find the volume. So 1 1/4 here, 1 1/4. If I wanted to turn into an improper fraction, we have to multiply 4 and 1, which is 4, add 1, which is 5/4. So our dimensions for this one are 5/4. 5/4. And we know that our width is 1. Now, if I want to represent 1 as a fraction, I can do 1 over 1. So times 1 over 1. And then 1 1/2. Go ahead and think of what that would be as an improper fraction. You can go ahead and pause the video. So we know 1 1/2 is going to be 3 halves. So once again, you're going to multiply the numerators and the denominators. So go ahead and solve this. So once again, length times width times height. You should have made sure that they have this in improper fractions. So it should be 15 over 8 or 1 7/8 inches, inches cubed. Because it is volume cubed. So go ahead, if you haven't already solved it, write that down. Now, look where it says here, how many cubes with side lengths of 1/4 would be needed to fill the prism? Now, we already know the volume of the prism, which is 5/8 or 1 7/8. Now, think about this part, a cube. A cube has all sides the same. It's not like a rectangular prism which has different measurements. This is a cube. So side lengths of 1/4. So we know cube, you're going to have three things, your length, your width, and your height. So if all sides are the same, then your volume of this cube would be 1/4. Oopsies. It's going to be 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4. Go ahead and copy that down. Now, like we know about length times width times height, the volume of this cube is going to be 1 over 64. 64 inches cubed. That is the volume of one cube. Now, if the volume of one cube is 1 in 64, how many of these would make one unit cube? So to make one unit cube, we have to multiply by 64. So multiply this whole thing by 64. Now what we're doing is we're making one cube. Now we know that multiplying 164 times 64 is going to give us 1. This lets us know that there's 64 cubes to make up here. So once again, a cube is 1 over 64 for a 1/4 side length. Now, to get one unit cube, you have to multiply by 64 to get one unit cube if our side length is 1/4. Now, we know our volume is 15 over 8. I want to know how many 1/4 inch cubes would that take? Well, I have to multiply by 64 of the smaller cubes to get 120 1/4 inch cubes, right? I multiplied by 64 here because that would be how many 1/4 inch cubes that would take, right? So it will take 120 1/4 inch cubes. Now go ahead, based on what we learned, multiply these values to find the volume. Go ahead and pause the video. We know a cube, all sides are equal. So for a cube, remember length times width times height, it's going to be 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, which will give us a volume of 1/8. Now, remember, I'm trying to find how many 1/8, 1/2 cubes are in this volume. So I want to get the unit cube first. So I'm going to multiply this by 8. And then I'm going to get 1 unit cube. 1 unit cube. So go ahead and write that down. Now, it took me 8 1/2 blocks to get 1 unit cube. Now, I want to find out, well, how many 1/2 cubes are going to fit in there? Well, we know 8 are going to fit 1 unit cube. So I'm going to multiply the volume now, 9/8 times 8. So you can put this in your calculator, or you can do it by hand. So times 8, I'm going to make it to a fraction. Now you can multiply on through. 72 over 8, which gives us 9. So 9 1/2 cubes could fit. Cubes. Go ahead and write this down in your notebook. Now, what I want you to do is on a separate sheet of paper, write this checkpoint. First, I want you to find the volume of these dimensions, the length, the width, and the height, based on the notes that we took so far. And then I also want you to answer, how many cubes with a side length of 1/4 will fit? So you're going to have two things, to find the volume and how many cubes with the side length of 1/4 will fit the whole rectangular prism. So go ahead and pause the video. We are done. And when you are done with your work, go ahead and turn that in to me.